Hi, you guys. Back to seventh grade math. We are working on comparing and ordering fractions, decimals, and percents. So, in your last lesson, you saw how to go from a percent to a decimal by just moving that decimal point over two spaces and putting a percent sign behind. So, we're going to get to the point that you guys are super fluent going from fractions to decimals to percents. That's our learning target for today. So let's take a look at what that means. So for our first example over here, we have 7% and we have 1/20th, right? So we have to put them in a common form so that we can compare them. So if we were to put this as a decimal, it would look like this, 0.07 or 7/100ths, right? So let's rewrite that in fraction form if you want to compare them as fractions. If we were to write this as a fraction with 100 as the denominator, we know we would have to multiply by 5 there and by 5 there. So we would have a denominator or a numerator that is 5 over 100. And once you have them in a common form, then you can compare and you'd say, hey, I know that one is greater than this one. Now, if you wanted to go from this form into decimal form, you could again go to put it in a form where the denominator is 100, and then it would look like this. You'd say 5/100ths. Okay. Remember, this is the 10th space, the 100th space, so that would be 5/100ths, that would be 7/100ths. And again, this one's still greater. So, in order to compare, you have to have them in a common form. We don't really care which form you have them in, but you have to either have them as a fraction with a common denominator, as a decimal, in order to compare. Okay? Or if you had them as a percent, you could do that. So you could turn this one into a percent too, and you could say that would be 5%. So that's how you compare them. So for B, you have 37/100ths or 1/3. Now, 1/3 is going to be about 0.33. And the 3 is repeating. Oops, I need to move that over. Okay. So then when we compare them, you would say this one is larger. Now you ask, where did we get this? We know if you take 1 divided by 3, you end up with this, about 1/3. Or if you had 33 times 3, you would have about 99. So you have to know these common fractions and what they look like in decimal form. Now, at some point, you may get used to what eighths look like in decimal form. But for now, I just want you to look at this and notice that if we had 4/8, that would be half. So this is going to be more than half. This is going to be less than half. And so without even putting them in a common form, you could say that that is greater than that. So being able to compare them to a marker like 1/2, which would be 4/8, or zero point 0.5, allows you to see, hey, we know that one's bigger than that one, even without putting them in the same form. So let's look at some examples. We have the question, which is greater, 3/20ths or 16%. So you have to ask yourself, which form do you want them to be in? And I'm going to choose to go ahead and put them with a denominator of 100. So if we were to make this equivalent to something where the denominator is 100, we know that we would multiply by 5 on the bottom. So on the top, we would have to multiply by 5. 3 times 5 would be 15. And if we were to put this in a form, we know that 16% would be 16 over 100. So now we have these two in the same fraction form with the same denominator, and we can easily see that this is greater than this because 16 is greater than 15. So now we have part B. We're comparing 79% and 0.08. Now my hint to you is make yourself say this out loud. This would be 8/100ths. So if you were to put that in fraction form, that would be 8 over 100. But maybe we don't need to go to fraction form because you rocked the last lesson and you know how to go from a percent to a decimal. So you know you move it over 2 spots. So this would be 0.79 in decimal form, and this would be 0.08 or 79 hundredths and 8 hundredths. Then when they are in the same form, it's really easy to compare. Okay, so you have to choose the form that is easiest. All right, so there we go. Now here's a real life application. You and your sister are taking shots at a soccer goal. You make 72% of your shots, and your sister makes 19 out of 25 of her shots. Your friend makes, ooh, we have a friend here. All right, your friend makes 0.67, or sorry, I messed that up, 76 hundredths. So you have to compare them. We have a decimal, we have a percent, and we have a fraction, okay? So we have to figure out what we want to do. And at this point, I'm thinking equivalent fraction might be the best way to go. So this would be 76 out of 100. This would be 72 out of 100. And we know that if we multiply this by 4, we get 100 as our denominator, and 19 times 4, we'll do that real quick. It would be 76. So if we were to compare them, I'm noticing I wrote the friends thing down wrong. So this was 67. So your friend made 67%. So if we compare them, then we can easily put them on a number line and see that your sister made the most shots. Then you made the next highest percentage of shots, and then your friend made the next highest. So for the next problem, we're not going to solve it all, but we are going to take a quick glance at this table and notice how if you had data, you could easily put it in fraction form and percent form. So they go from the decimal to percent. Knowing how to go from percent to decimal is what we learned last lesson. And you can go from decimal form to fraction form, because you would read this out loud 3 hundredths. You would read this out loud 3 hundredths. So knowing how to go from form to form is super important in order to compare data accurately. So for your homework today, you are going to fill in some tables like that, going from fraction to decimal and percent. And then for the next part, you're going to tell which number is greater. You must put it in a common form first. So you have to be comparing percent to percent or decimal to decimal. So figure out which one you want to change so that it is in the same form as the other one, okay? The second part down here, you are going to use a number line. So put all of them in a common form before you compare. Now it says least to greatest. That's super important when they ask you to order. So you're going to start with the smallest one and work up to the biggest one. Okay, so those are your homework assignments for today. Make sure you put it in common form and have fun with this.